me. Since I've been doing Proven Not Perfect, I've had a desire to have a younger voice in the room, the proverbial room of Proven Not Perfect. Um,
Yeah.
because my message has largely been just this pull and in some ways mission to help women in this life that we are living
Mhm.
and trying to do it all for all, and oftentimes holding ourselves to an unrealistic measure, right? And
Yeah.
okay, that's okay for us. We'll get through it. We've done it, many of us. But what about our daughters and our nieces and our daughter-in-laws and on down the
Yeah.
line, right? What are you guys seeing? What are we showing you? I know in a lot of ways we're showing you major accomplishments, from C-suite roles to
Mhm.
board roles, business leadership roles, all parts in between, right? In every industry, from academia to science, to
Yeah.
even rocket science, right? And I know for a fact that you know those moms and have that community of moms, because I'm dear friends with your mom, right?
Yeah.
But I'd love to open space for a conversation around, first of all, what is the younger generation? What are you seeing as you look up right now, at us who are maturing gracefully? And what bits did you take, maybe unconsciously for you, maybe unconsciously given to you by us? What bits did
Mhm.
you take that you had to work past to establish your own baseline of thinking? We just jumping right on in, baby girl.
Yeah, yeah, we are. Oh, that's a great question. I think what I'm seeing and what I'm very thankful to have seen growing up is just very successful people, especially women who look like me.
Mm,
And I might not have always seen that on the TV or on social media. And so being able to see that, whether it was once a month or at least once a year, like that definitely established like this is possible for me. And it's
mm,
almost, the standard. Like this can be, the new normal, if you will, for what, I can achieve and what I can do with my own life. And I think one of the bits that I've taken and had to kind of make my own is like, what does that success look like for myself?
wow.
And what does it look like to, like, I know with a lot of, mothers and parents, it's you want your kids to do better than you, and you want your kids to outdo the accomplishments you've made. And I think one thing I've been trying to navigate is, well, what does that look like for me to outdo my parents? Outdo them in what way? How can I best serve them and the life that they've set up for me?
Mm,
And so it's definitely been an interesting time navigating that. Especially looking with, both my siblings, we all are doing such different things, and we're all trying to like go in these pathways that are right for us, that we're called to go on,
yeah.
while recognizing the amazing example that our parents have set for us, and what it means to serve the community and what it means to uplift the marginalized and things like that. So I
Mm,
think definitely having grown up with that, of like, this is success and success is great, but also what do you do with that, and how do you still serve in that? How do you, make life better for others, frankly? And just how can we do that in our own way, because it's not going to look the same as my parents, it's not going to look the same as my friends' parents. And that's a good thing, because we're not all called to have the same route, because we don't all have the same giftings. So I know that was a very
oh,
long-winded answer, but
wow.
those are my thoughts.
But I think that's really good, because what I hear you saying is, you guys paid attention. You paid attention, you are paying attention.
Yeah.
As you're, out of school, young, successful woman, professional, and we'll talk about that. But you paid attention. And you also said something that makes me feel a little bit better, which is, um, even though the measure of success that you have had around you has been a standard, you haven't necessarily clung to an unrealistic starting standard. Because
Hmm.
the reality is, none of us were there at,
Hmm.
few of us, I won't say none, few of us were there at early 20s, right? It
Yeah.
was a journey. And so when
Mhm.
you guys hit the scene, we were in full stride and movement, and
Yeah.
it only progressed from there. So, it's really neat to hear that there's been some unpacking, and really appreciating and understanding that you're at a starting point, right?
Mhm.
And it's a journey. It's a journey.
Yeah.
The topic that I asked you to give a little bit of thought to was being a young woman in today's culture
Mhm.
and finding your voice.
Yeah.
Um, when I ask that question, what comes up for you?
Yeah. Um, the first thing that comes to mind is 2020. I feel like comes to a lot of people's minds when a lot of topics come up. But I would say 2020 is when I really began to find my voice. I always had one, but I began to really come into it in 2020 for a couple reasons. First being that I had recently started really taking seriously my relationship with God. And when the pandemic really was in full flow, I, like half of Gen Z, got on TikTok, and I began to just share videos about my journey, about learning and reading the Bible for the first time on my own. And doing that, people started following me and they started commenting, and they would reach out and say, like, I'm struggling with this too, or I'm learning this at the same time as you. And so that was one of the first moments where I was like, oh, I can say things and they matter, and people listen and they can help people. And I want to keep doing this. And so I've done that ever since. And
Mm.
then I started going to protests, and I ended up leading protests, leading marches, speaking at protests. And I remember there was this one, there were hundreds of people there, and I just got on top of this building as people were giving speeches, and I was just yelling my heart out to this people. And I just remember this feeling of like, dang, my voice matters, and dang, I have something to say.
Wow.
And to really have the attention of a bunch of people, many of whom didn't even look like me, and to hear them listen, hang on every word. And I'm like, I think that was one of the moments that really shook me, of I need to keep saying something. And you know especially when it's something that might not be always talked about, especially when it might be something that people don't often hear about, especially in certain communities where there's not a lot of people who look like me. And so I think those were some really amazing opportunities to be able to share my own story, and to know that not only are the people who can relate to my story and who can experience some sort of healing and freedom when they know that they're not alone in that, but to share that perspective with others who could have never really known what it felt like for me to grow up in predominantly white spaces my whole life. They couldn't have known. And so I think just that was when I really began to learn that my voice matters, what I say matters, what I've experienced matters, and that, like, that's how we're going to move forward. Like, we can't move forward without talking about it. I think that was when I began to really start learning that.
Wow. Yeah, I think I got chills, first of all, because the visual of you standing strong in your conviction in front of a whole sea of strangers and articulating your thoughts and your experiences and being seen and heard, right? That's huge. It's huge. So that's an experience that you take and then you start to bring into forming your early position as a professional woman.
Mm-hmm.
How do you translate that, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you, one of the things that I think, safe to say, my peer group is we grew up in an era where we had a voice and an articulation that was
Mm-hmm.
outside of our career. And then in
Yeah.
our career, we tidied it up and cleaned it up. And not that it was dirty, but it was different, right? And
Yeah.
sometimes the word that's used code switched from the
Mm-hmm.
one to the other. And we almost felt that we had to do that because
Mm-hmm.
we felt that it would not be understood. We would
Yeah.
understood. Um, is that the case anymore for young professional women, or
Mm.
No, are we more blended in thinking about who we are and how we use our voice and how we show up? Is it more consistent?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's not, I wouldn't say always, but I think there's still a little bit of that hesitation, that little thought in the back of the mind of, should I be careful with my words? How can I frame this in a way that's less uncomfortable for other people? But I would say I think it's grown a lot in terms of, I would rather show up as my authentic self than show up as anybody else. And I think it's this growing, for lack of a better word, this self-love movement of, I would rather just be me. And if you're not going to accept me for who I am, I'll find somewhere that will. I'll find someone that will. And I think I definitely noticed that within, especially like this next wave of professionals. And one thing I love that's I feel like is unique about my role as a campus missionary is that, like, literally part of my job is to share my testimony. And I have seen, and like, the testimony, the word references, God will do it again. And I think being able to share my testimony, especially with students, regardless of what they've been through, there's typically at least one part of it where they see themselves, where they say, oh, I also experienced that. Oh, I've also had those same thoughts. And I've noticed that it just breaks down so many walls
So you
when,
trailed literally your learning right on in to what would be your chosen career. So
yeah.
let's talk about that. So let's talk about that. So share with everybody what your career is
Mhm.
and how you got here.
That's a story right there.
A testimony.
I will give the brief version. But yeah, so my role, I am a campus missionary at my alma mater, George Washington University, with an organization called Every Nation. And for my job, I get to just give my whole heart to these students. I get to spread the gospel on campus. I get to disciple students and help them grow in their faith, lead small group, preach messages at Bible studies, things like that. And really empower them to be leaders, help them be independently dependent on God. And yeah, like as I was mentioning in this role, well, how I got here is a whole other story because it was a lot of wrestling. It was a lot of I had a plan. My family and I had a plan for my life, and we all liked it. It was all good for us. And God had other plans.
Yes. Amen.
And it took a lot of confirmation, so much prayer, tears, like you name it, to really get to this place of, it's undeniable. If I deny what God's calling me to do, then I'd be lying. And it took months of that, but when I finally, like, in the last straw, I'll just tell this really short testimony. The last straw for me was a mission trip we went on to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. And I told God, I said, God, if I don't see anybody give their life to Christ, if I don't see anything miraculous happen, I'll know you're not calling me into this work because clearly I suck at this job. And God has such a sense of humor because not did one student or two or three or four, but 54 students gave their life to Christ. And I was part of 7 of those conversations. And I was just conveniently reminded yesterday about 7 being the number of completion. And so it was a long journey to get here and a lot of confirmation, a lot of, questions and doubts and anxieties. But now I'm so happy to be able to almost get back to the work that I was doing as a student, but now be able to do it full time and just see these students grow so much in their walk with God and then watch them help other students in their walk. It's just, I love that progression right there.
So would you call yourself a minister, a practicing minister? I mean, so how do you define who you are becoming? Or do
Mm,
you define it?
that that's another, you have the good questions. um I would say, well, my legal title is a campus missionary, and I will be commissioned in January to be, clergy, which feels so fancy. I'll be clergy.
Go ahead.
Um, but I would say at this point, I've kind of tried to stop defining what's ahead for me.
Yeah,
I'm in a place where I'm trying to plan,
yeah.
because planning is good. Planning and preparing are good things, but planning while being flexible for whatever God has. And I think I'm starting to learn that balance. And like defining myself, I'm a daughter of God. I am a witness, I'm a disciple, and whatever job title I have next, that'll be great. But I try to only define myself now as the things that I know are not going to change. And then
Oh,
go from there.
girl, you are so wise. I mean, I think I shared with you when we reconnected recently, and you literally brought me to tears. Literally, I'm like, how is young Kaylyn bringing me to tears? And you did, in such a beautiful way, because I just listened to you and watched you and was so proud of this young woman who is so centered in who she is, and more importantly, whose she is. That malleable
Yeah.
way is something that you are courageously doing daily, right? And such a young age. And God, it took so much for him to get me to a place where yeah, grew up in the church and grew up with a relationship and baptized early in life and gave my life to Christ in Christian schools and Catholic schools and all the things. But just like we started the conversation talking about integrating our voice
Hmm.
from my chantra on the weekend and my chantra Monday through Friday,
Yeah.
um, it was a journey, right?
Hmm.
It was also a journey for me to take my chantra, who
Hmm.
has been guided and raised deep in faith,
Yeah.
and find how to invite that spirit to
Hmm.
consume me Monday through Sunday, right?
Yeah.
So I lead with that, right? I talk with that. I live with that. But that was really hard for me to get to a place of integrating, pulling that in. So I'd love your thought on this.
Hmm.
For those that are young and starting their careers, and, you know, do you think you have to, okay, I'm going the mission route to pull Jesus, who we love, in Monday through Sunday? Or can you stay on path and be the musician and be the writer and be the rapper and be all the
Yeah.
things that, folks want to be, but
Yeah.
still incorporate, bring them in? I'd love you to talk to the folks about that, because I suspect that, maybe I'm not alone, whether they're older and more mature, or whether they're younger and trying to figure it out, right? How do they do that? What do you think?
Yeah. That's another great question. You got the hard hitters this morning.
Girl, look, I went to yoga. I'm
I
teasing. I'm
love it.
teasing. I just have been so excited to get your perspective, because your wisdom is
Yeah.
before you. And anyway, I acknowledge that. I see that.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. I was recently talking to someone and I was encouraging them to not go the path of ministry as a backup plan, to not go that because, oh, I'm a Christian, this feels like what I'm supposed to do. I'm
Mm.
so thankful that it took me like 5 months and 18,000 confirmations for God to really call me into this, because now I know I'm so certain that this is what I'm called to do. But I tell all my students, God has a calling for your life, and it could be ministry, it could not be ministry. At the end of the day, we're all fishers of men. We're all disciples, and the one command we all have is to make disciples of all nations, to love God and to love our neighbor. And so I definitely would encourage people of all ages who love Jesus, like, wherever God calls you is your mission field. Mine just happens to be George Washington, and this is my full-time job, right? But
Yes.
that's not what God's calling everyone to do. And I think that's a really beautiful thing, because, I can't reach everybody at George Washington. Like, not everybody is there. I can't reach the people that my engineer friend can reach, or that my teacher friend can reach, or my lawyer friend can reach. And so I just definitely think that God's created us all unique, with unique gifts and unique callings. And I love, somebody mentioned about how, like, God is doing a work. He's doing a work in schools. He's doing a work in hospitals. He's doing a work in banks, and we should join where he's doing the work. And that's going to be in so many different places, in so many different sectors of the world. And there's always going to be an opportunity to honor God, to be a witness for him in those places. If you're walking with him and you're abiding in him truly, I think that's the only thing that you really got to do is just walk with him. And he's going to help you be a witness in those places, whether it's, you're verbally sharing the gospel with someone, or it's the actions that you do that people look at and say, that's different. I want to know more. Why do they live like that? So, yeah.
Yes, girl, that's right on. I think that's right on. And I think even my younger self confused that you are being Monday to Sunday, right?
Yeah.
You are,
Yeah.
because you're walking and living and moving a certain way. You're not
Hmm.
getting it right all the time. You're not perfect, right?
Yeah.
Clearly, you're not. There's some pivots and pitfalls, but what do you
Yeah.
do when that happens? What do you do when you know that you have offended someone? What do
Hmm.
you do? Do you stay in that place? Do you own that? Or do you double back and do the Christian thing?
Yeah.
Reach back out and say, hey, that start wasn't the right start. I need to start over. Do we
Mhm.
acknowledge our ego is leading versus our heart is leading? Right?
Whew.
Girl,
Mm.
even think of the yeses that we give way too freely. Girl, accountable. That I give way too freely. Why am I giving that yes?
Yeah.
Is that yes truly a yes that's
Hmm.
going to advance my purpose in this life? Or
Yeah.
is that yes advancing my ego in this life? Two different things, right? Yeah. Because if you say a lot of yeses that are all about ego,
Hmm.
purpose gets shortchanged.
Yeah.
So now I'm really straining myself outside of the box of where I should be. Wow.
Oh my gosh. I love that you said that. I so clearly remember we were at a retreat and they were talking about the idol of variety.
Oh,
Ooh, my heart. And
girl.
and at this point, this was very early on in my senior year, and I was already burnt out. I was saying yes to everything. I believe that this is from God. God's given me a heart that just really cares. He's a problem. I want to
Me
fix it.
too. Yes.
You get it. And but the way that this pastor was talking about, like, what is God calling you to do and what is he not? Like, what is in the boundaries that God's created for you and what's his? And I said, oh my gosh, no, no way.
Yes.
And it was just so convicting because I was realizing that part of this was actually my pride and part of me not
Yes.
trusting that God can actually handle everything and that I'm just here, I'm just help, like I get to partner with him in what he's doing, but he's
Yes.
the one doing it. And I don't need to put myself into every single need, every single situation because I'm not called to do that. Like I had to realize that there are things that I'm called to and there are things that I'm not. And that's okay that I'm not trying to put myself into everybody's business and try to help everybody and fix every situation because that's not what I was created to do. So I love that you said that.
Well, it's definitely part of the journey and the story for me
Yeah.
in getting more clear. You mentioned 2020. In 2020, it was really easy to receive the scripture that God brought forth to me, which is, Psalms 46:10, be still and know that I am God. It was really easy for me to take that when we had to let go of a lot of things, right? Which is why I know he knows that I'm on the remedial version of this whole thing because he gives me stuff in pieces when I could get my head around it for a long time when I don't need it
Yeah.
yet. So that when I do need it, I've
Hmm.
been saying it for a long time because the scripture will not let me go because he
Yeah.
knows, oh, I got to give it to her in advance. And she's got to not even understand why. And then at some point, she's going to click. And
Yeah.
then everything opens up. Then we get busy. Then all the activities creep up again and all the things and all the things. And of course, when you and I and everyone are good at a thing, people
Hmm.
acknowledge that thing you're good at. And out of the goodness of their heart, they're asking
Yeah.
you to engage more and be a part
Yeah.
of things, which is a complete compliment, right? But there's so many good things, right? And
Yeah.
we can't
Yeah.
do them all. Just almost like you said with the career. somebody's going to be in the bank, and somebody's going to be in the boardroom, and somebody's going to be, on the racetrack, and somebody's going to be on the football field, right? It's all those things. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So, wow, that's really cool. Well, I'm going to tell you, the movement that you're creating is outstanding, and the seeds that are being planted into others is outstanding. I think that as you continue to grow in the movement that you are being led, you have message not only for your peer group, but you have message for parents, right? Because we get to see how to actually make the space to let you guys show us what
Yeah.
this looks like in a today voice. And it's a little bit different maybe than how we thought it should. So when I say proven not perfect, it's you're so at the beginning of this journey, but I'd love to know how those words resonate for you.
Mm, proven not perfect. Well, I think one thing that God's been really showing me recently, and this isn't exactly, well, I'll just say it. One thing is that, in Ephesians, it talks about how we were chosen and how, before the beginning of time, like you were chosen, you were predestined by God to be holy and blameless, to be in relationship with Him. And so that's one thing that I think I've been trying to really, believe and walk in, is the fact that I was not only chosen by God, but that was way before I did anything that was good or bad.
Ooh.
Never going to be unchosen. And if the creator of everything chose me, does it really matter who else does? Because I've already been,
Ooh, girl, what?
right? And I'm so not perfect. Like I am so far from perfect, but I've already been chosen. In First Thessalonians, it says that we have been approved by God to be entrusted with the gospel. I'm so not perfect, but I've already been approved by God. And
Amen.
so when you say proven not perfect, the first thing that comes to my mind is like, man, God knew that I wouldn't be perfect. And He still loved me. He still chose me. He still saved me. He still wanted me. And I feel like that's something that, everybody wants to be wanted. Everybody wants to be loved. They want to be seen. They want to be heard. They want to be known. But to know that I've already had that since before time began, I'll always have that. And I don't have to find that anywhere else.
Oh,
That's kind of where what the title makes me think of, is that in every single
yes.
one of my imperfections, I'm still chosen. And all God asked me to do is show up. And He asked me to be with Him. And if I'm with Him and I show up, He's got it.
So y'all see why this child, baby girl, my friend's daughter, had me crying at the reintroduction of her. What? Seriously, girl, God speaks through your voice.
Thank you.
You are so centered. You are so grounded. I am I am so proud of you. I am so grateful that the reconnection was meant to happen at this appointed time,
Yeah.
with Him working on me in the ways that He is, and telling me to get so selfless that I start a YouTube channel and a podcast and start talking to the people and letting
Yeah.
the people know that even though the resumes and the LinkedIn's and all the things show the buttoned up selves, we're not perfect and we're living imperfect lives. And by the way, it still ends up okay because we're
Yeah.
chosen. Amen. Girl, I love you. I'm so proud of you. You're gonna have to come back. We're gonna have to, I mean, like, girl, this segment right here
It's
is
not enough
giving
time.
me some
100%.
stuff. Yeah, giving me some stuff. So
Definitely.
I hope that you'll be willing to do that. I'll definitely be pulling into you. Super
Yeah.
excited to see all the souls that are singing to a new tune soon here in your ministry. And I'm just praying for your ministry to continue to be blessed and overflowing abundantly, more than you could ever imagine and ever see. In the blessed name of Jesus, I'm so excited. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. This was amazing.
You are amazing. Bye.
Bye.